Okay, hi everyone. My name is Eli Schwartz. I'm a principal PM at the Excel team. Currently I'm leading the team that works on the Get Data experience, how Excel works with Power Query on external data sources. And previously I've been leading the BI scope within the 2016 release, and this is what we're going to talk a little bit this morning. First of all, I believe most of you have attended the keynote. How exciting was that? Amir on stage is always a spectacle to see. So let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna see in this presentation. First, a little bit of orientation. Excel, Microsoft BI, that was represented quite well in the keynote, but we're gonna dwell on some of the details there. I'll talk about the goals that led us in designing the BI functionality in Excel 2016 and share with you what the new features. And of course, I'll try to do as many demos as I can. So I'll do a little bit switching between the devices just to show you bits and pieces of the functionality that we have added. And I will leave some time for questions and answers. But if there's something that bugs you throughout the presentation, just raise your hands and we'll talk about it throughout the presentation. So, Excel has been the prominent data analysis tool for so many years. It evolved over the years. And with the new world that we see abundance of data coming in, multiple sources, whether it's on-prem, online, services, files, you name it, there is data there that you need to analyze. And Excel is answering those questions in the modern world, whether it's the answers to multiple data sources from various locations, multiple platforms. We've released Excel for Android, for Mac, for iOS, and of course for Windows platforms. And in 2016, we delivered on two major business needs. One of them is BI, or business analysis functionality, and the other one is data loss prevention, which is integrated into SharePoint, and we'll not talk about it in this presentation, but we'll focus on the BI scope. So the key of what we want to achieve in 2016 is a streamlined and powerful user experience of data analysis in Excel. You will see me use the term in context a lot throughout this presentation because this is one of the key themes that led us through. There is one thing of having a process that goes through various applications and various features within the product. And we will talk about getting the data, analyzing it, visualizing it afterwards. And we'll talk a little bit about publishing. And we'll talk about, there's another session that I'm leading tomorrow morning that's about Excel Online. And we'll talk about consuming and publishing in more details there. So, and one of the things when we talk about in context, there's one thing of having all the tools at your hand on your computer and be able to move between those tools. There's another thing of having all those tools within the context of what you do in Excel right now. And this is the term in context that I'm referring to. Whether you have to go to another application, bring something from that application, or you have it at the tip of your mouse pointer when you work through in Excel. Whether you need to go to another ribbon or you have that functionality in the data, in the pivot table or in the field well of the pivot table. So let's start the journey with data acquisition. The key thing that we went through in 2016 here is that we took Power Query, which is the prominent Microsoft tool for ETL, for getting data, transforming data, and integrated it into Excel. Right now, Power Query is a core part of Excel, which means that all the functionality that's available in Power Query, was available in Power Query as an add-in in 2013, is now part of the core tab of Excel. It's part of the data tab. It's called Get and Transform. I will show you that in a minute. And you get all this key functionality like finding enterprise data, supporting multiple data sources with the huge list of connectors that we're adding, and we'll keep on adding. Data shaping and transformations, very powerful tool for data shaping and transformation, and bringing data into the data model or into the grid of Excel per your needs. Additional benefits from integrating Power Query into Excel was that it's right now part of the Excel process, and as such, it works within the undo stack. It's part of the VBA and data model. Object model of Excel. So it's programmable. You can undo and redo actions in Excel. You can create macros using Power Query, and so on. You can also share your queries with other users. And actually, in recent updates, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, we also introduced the ability of sharing and copying queries between Power BI and Excel. So you can work with Power BI Desktop or work with Excel and switch between them seamlessly when you're working on the data sources. And if we compare it a little bit to Excel 2013, in Excel 2013, all the transformations used to happen through macros, through programming, or through actions on the grid. And the automation was VBA based. With Power Query within Excel, you have a very easy to transformation UI within the query editor, which is the main tool of Power Query. And those actions are actually get repeated without the need to write code for that, just with the mere sequencing of the queries within Power Query. You can bring the data to data model or to the grid, refresh it at need. And if you need something more than the UI does not provide you, you also have the M language, which is a programmability language that can be used for advanced queries, for merging beyond what the UI allows you to. Additional enhancements are the data sources. And this is just a partial list of what we're including in Power Query as part of Excel. What you see here is that we added the multiple sources like Hadoop and Azure sources and additional files and dynamic CRM and Facebook and so on, and the list goes on. And the key part is that we'll keep on adding those sources, and you actually see those coming in if you have a subscription, you will see those new data sources coming in every month, one or two in every month, and in the future we'll have much more flowing in. Another important part is that we moved to an evergreen form within Excel subscription, in Office subscription in general, which means that you no longer have to wait for 3 years until you get the next Excel version with the next goodness that we provide. Now, how many of you are right now subscription users? And the rest of you are using perpetual, I presume, by once at a time. So there's a key difference this time is that we keep adding functionality every month to Power Query and to Excel and releasing it on a monthly basis to subscription users. So one of the latest thing that we have got in is, as I mentioned, copy-paste of queries between workbooks and between Power BI Desktop and Excel. Various data connectivity updates like enhanced connectors for SharePoint list, XLS imports, database relationship import, new transformations within the query editor, and so on. And each month, the list gets bigger and bigger. So if you ever wanted an incentive to move to a subscription model, this is the one. Now, let's switch and have a look at a little bit into Excel. So, how many of you are already using 2016? Good. So, if you go into the Data tab of 2016, you would see a new chunk called Get and Transform. Actually, all the old external data connection are collapsed on the left side. And you see there's a new query. There's an ability to show queries, and you have the right pane that shows queries popping up. You can bring from tables, and you can look at recent sources. If you select new query, you can see multiple sources that are available for creating queries based on them, from files, from various databases, from various Azure sources, and from other sources. Actually, in the upcoming, not the upcoming month, but the following one, we'll have another category here that will talk about online services. So you would see Salesforce and Salesforce objects, and SharePoint list and SharePoint online list separated into a different category. And you will see more connectors coming, like JSON connector, Azure MySQL Marketplace, and so on. Now, let's get something from the web. Let's assume that I have a product that is directed for the topmost customers in the world, for the billionaires. And I want to find out where in the world I can find billionaires to sell them this product. So I'll go to a site such as Gapminder, which is a public, hold on. This is a good thing. Now I'm really comfortable, because usually when you demo, something goes really bad. So it happens at the beginning. So I know that all the other demos will work great. So let me just fix the Wi-Fi, and we'll continue. Oh, this one?
So this would be the demo Wi-Fi right above you.
Okay. Demo Wi-Fi. Demo. MS Demo. And we should be okay. Apologize for that. So let's find ourselves some billionaire information. Billionaire per million people. That looks good. There's a table here that have a distribution across the countries. Let's just pick this URL and go back to Excel and just copy paste the URL here. What Power Query does at this stage is actually scrapes the web page, and it sees the document structure, and it sees the table that's on that document. So let's edit the information. And here we get the query editor. And we can quickly see that there are two columns here that I actually don't need. So I can remove those. And I can use the headers. The first row is headers. And I have some data here, but I also want to get rid of all the zeros. That doesn't really provide me with any information. So I make this assumption that on the last year of the analysis, I check for billionaires. If there's none, I just drop the whole row. Sorry. And now I have lines of information. Now the problem with this data that it's actually pivoted already, according to a year. So it's very hard to provide any kind of analysis on top of this data. So I'm going to use something that, when I used to do that in Excel using VBA, it took me hours to perform this action, to write the code for that. But Power Query does that very easily. I just select unpivot other columns, because I still want to use the country as my pivot. and I get actually line items, individual data entries that I can analyze based on. If you look on the side here, on the right side, you would see actually all the steps that I've taken in order to perform the data cleanup so far. Those steps are repeatable, are deletable if needed. For example, I can go back and just, instead of removing the columns, I can see exactly the steps that I have taken. And each time that I refresh this data source, those steps get repeated. So you don't have to repeat any manipulation on the data that you have created. Now let's do some changes. Let's call this, let's make sure that the data type is correct. So the decimal number, and this is, let's call it year. And this is actually country. And just make sure that this is a whole number. And now I can load this information back into the workbook. And I can choose whether I want to load it just for the table, use just a connection without bringing the data into a query table, and whether I want to load it into the model or not. Let's do this simple this time. Let's just load it to the grid. And you can see the table here. I can insert a pivot table. Now, if in the pivot table, you would see a new attribute that you have not seen before. It's grayed out right now because I didn't use the data model. But if you use the data model, that would be radio button would be the default. So it will search for the data model and will offer you to create a pivot table based on the data model and not based on the local data in the workbook. So, hold on. This is odd. Okay, here we go. So I have the value here. I can just change it into the average sum of billionaires. And I can do a quick analysis based on the country. And just sort descending according to the value. And filter the top 10. And now I have quite easily, if you can ignore the mishaps of demoing, you can see quite easily that I have top 10 countries in the world where we can call it billionaire density, and I know where to market my product. I know where to focus. Just to showcase very quick analysis, there's not much into this analysis other than just filtering, but we moved from a data source that was very hard to read, very hard to analyze, actually kind of pre-analyzed in a certain way, into something that can be analyzed and can be visualized afterwards. We can put it on a map. Using Power Map, we can put it on a grid, and so on. Another aspect of Power Query that I mentioned is that we have introduced Power Query as part of Excel. And now you can actually write VBA and record macros that is using queries and Power Query. So let's use this one as an example. I pre-prepared some M statements and created a macro on top of that. Let's just see that we see the queries that Right now, we don't have any queries in the workbook. And I've just created a short script, which I show you afterwards. We have the M statement in the formula. We have some parameters. We don't want to load to the data. We want to load to the data model. We don't want to load to the worksheet. This is the query name, and this is the description. I just click Create, and you can see that it pulls the table that we had here into Power Query and creates a query based on that. Let's see. That does happen. I've been very cocky at the beginning talking about the first malfunction on the first demo, so I'm paying the price right now. You have to live your life by Murphy's Law. Okay, so we're back. Showing queries, creating a new query, and you can see it's loading, and now it's actually the same table that we have on the grid that's been loaded. We can obviously change some stuff and call it my last query and put it back into the grid, and then create another one. And you would see that it actually creates a table, a link table on the grid. So the idea here is that you can tie the VBA code into Excel, and we've added some objects in the object model in order to make it easy for you to do that. So you have this attribute query name, and let's see. Here, you have the query, so you can add the queries, query name, the M script, and the query description, which we actually use as parameters on the worksheet itself. Okay, can we move back? Let's move back to the presentation. And there's also another session coming up, actually right after this session. That's not me as speaker. That's a mistake. The speaker is going to be Miguel Lopez. He's the PM of Power Query, the product that we've integrated into Excel. So if you're interested in more tips and tricks on how to use Power Query within Excel, this is the place to go. So let's talk a little bit about the next step, data analysis. You have the data already, but you want to model it and you want to create an analysis on top of it. And for that, we introduced a lot of new features into Excel. Some of them are usability and quality improvements into the whole process of using Excel and Power Pivot. We've added in-context editing of data model and measures, and we've added native Excel forecasting, which includes both formula and the wizard. Before that, I presume that since not all of you are using 2016, quite a few of you are still using 2013. So a year and a half ago, we released an update to 2013, which was based on customer insights and customer inputs. We went through customers and talked to them about what their biggest pains and what the biggest issues that they're encountering in 2013. And we released an update. You have a link here to that update. If you're using 2013 and you're not using this update will change your lives. No doubt about it. So some of the features that we've introduced into the data analysis part of Excel 2016 and the integration with Power Pivot. Deferred refresh. If previously, each time that you took an action within Power Pivot, you had to wait until it was propagated into Excel, and sometimes it took a lot of time. Now, once we introduced deferred refresh, you get all those actions propagated into Excel only when you move back to Excel from the Power Pivot Manage Power Pivot window. We've introduced search and field list. If you have a lot of data sources in your pivots and you need to find a specific field list that you're looking for, previously you had to scroll a very long list. Right now, all you need is search. We've introduced smart rename of tables. Now, if you used to use 2010 or 2013, you used to remember what exactly happened when you changed the column name in Power Pivot. Your whole analysis would be gone to shreds. Doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen also in the update of 2013. This is why I said it's going to change your lives if you use in Power Pivot. And we've also added in-context automatic relationship data detection. So you don't have to create the relationship within Power Pivot by yourselves. Excel will do that for you. And you can create and edit measures from the pivot, from the field list. Now let's have a look at some of the new stuff we have in Power Pivot. So here I have a table, just a standard sales fact table. If I go into Power Pivot, you would see that I have 3 more tables that I just pre-prepared. I'm going to load this table to the data model. And you would see that it appears as a linked table right now. And if we go into the diagram view, you would see that there are actually no relationship between those tables. Those are totally independent tables. But I still want to do some analysis based on that. I want to get some insights. So I want to create a pivot table. Now, since I have a model, you see that it actually defaults to use the workbook data model. And the option to add to data model is grayed out. And I want to create a new workbook with the pivot table. And I want to do some analysis on the revenue, so I can search very easily and find the revenue and bring it to the value. And I want to do that according to year, say calendar year. And you see that it already popped up a message saying that in order to complete this analysis, relationships need to be created. Now, if you look at the data, you'd see that actually the data is the same across all the columns because it doesn't really calculate the right data. It just accumulates whatever we have in that column without really the reference of the other table that is required for this analysis. So I'm just going to press auto detect. And now I have actually the sums of revenue per each year. If I go into the data model and look at the diagram view, you would see that it created a single relationship that was required for this analysis. The relationships that are created are dedicated for the analysis that you've asked for through the pivot table. Had I asked for a different analysis, I would have gotten maybe a different relationship. Now, let's try it out. Let's bring in maybe a geographical location. Again, you see that actually every row has the same number because there is no real calculation. I get the same notification that a relationship is required. I auto-detect this relationship. And now I have a proper analysis, which is logical. It doesn't repeat itself. And if I go into the data model, I can see that additional relationship has been created in order to support the analysis that I've requested. Now, I want to do some more changes in the data model. For example, I want to call, instead of place, which is really an awkward term, let's call it city. You see that in the background, there's a bar. It says that the data model has changed, but it's not propagated to Excel yet. I can make additional changes. I can make changes to measures, to column headers, to functions, whatever, to calculated columns. Doesn't matter. It will absorb all of it. And just let's change to something else. let's call it C year, and once I click, you would see that the bar has disappeared. The information has propagated into Excel and updated the analysis within Excel. So we don't suffer for any other consequences of changing the column names. The analysis has the right reference, and we can continue analyzing the data. Now, another new feature that we've introduced in 2016 is the forecasting. Previously, all we had in Excel was linear forecasting. That doesn't help you much, right? Most things in life are not linear. Maybe except the errors in my demos, but that's the only thing. But we wanted to have some kind of ability to forecast data, mostly on a time series based, that would allow you a more correct or more logical way of forecasting data. And we've introduced the time series based on exponential smoothing, which is a standard algorithm for forecasting based on time series. And we've introduced it in two ways. One way is a formula that you can play with within the grid itself, a set of formulas, that you can create your own analysis based on using those formulas. And another way is using the data wizard, the forecasting wizard. So I have here a time series based data. It's actually the passenger count in those dates in San Francisco Airport. And I want to forecast the passenger count in those dates as well. I just stand on this table and go to the forecast sheet. And it opens a really nice wizard that allows me to look and see the forecast. This is the automatic algorithm that creates this. What I can see here is that it identified a certain seasonality. And if I open, and what's blue is the actual data, and the orange line is the forecast. Now, I have additional options here. I can change the confidence interval here and select a lower or a higher confidence interval, which definitely will affect the results. You see that the algorithm automatically detected the seasonality. Obviously, I can decide that I don't agree with this selection and try and set that manually. But the algorithm knows probably better than I do. So if I play with it too much, you would see that the confidence you would see that the confidence levels are growing if I play manually with the and the analysis is actually not worth anything at all once I change the seasonality. And once I press create, it creates a new worksheet in the workbook that includes the chart that we have seen in the wizard, but it also creates all the calculations. So it creates the calculation, and you can see the formula here of the forecast and the upper boundary and the lower boundary. Now, one thing that we can actually do is try and test our algorithm and check past values with it. So I just drag the formula back into data that we are already familiar with from the past and look back here. And you can see that the forecast line and the actual data line are extremely close, which means that our forecasting data forecasting algorithm is indeed very close to actual events and forecasting quite well. And of course, you don't have to use the wizard. You can just use the formulas and create your own deviations of the forecasting algorithm. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so when you do it manually and then you go backwards, that'll kind of tell you what your manual calculation is deviated from trend.
Right, right.
So it would be really valuable to kind of go backwards.
Exactly. It actually creates you can actually gauge the difference between your calculations. So you just do a simple formula on that, and you can see a standard. You can calculate your own specific deviation from forecasting. Yes.
Behind the scenes, is it using a similar algorithm that's being used by Azure ML?
Both have aspects of. This is directly using exponential smoothing, which is a standard right now for time series forecasting. I know that Azure ML uses that, but they use other algorithms as well. That not the only thing that they're using in Azure ML. Okay, so let's move to the next stage. Next stage is visualizing the data. So we have quite a few tools in Excel that allow us to visualize data. One of the things that we had outside of Excel and now is part of Excel is Power Map called 3D Maps, which allows you to take the information and put it on a globe and get a visual analysis, record actually a story and play that story with data. Data changes over time, over global information. You can see that through Power Map. We've also introduced new chart types. Chart types that are based on a new charting engine, the Ivy engine. You would see there are quite a few sessions in the upcoming 2 days about new chart types. There's Scott Rubel's today at 1, and there's another one tomorrow, which will show you tips and tricks of the new charts. I will just show you the real new charts. And also we introduced time grouping in pivot tables and pivot charts. So let's have a look into that. Those are very familiar charts that we have in Excel. We have an abundance of charts in Excel, but we want to see something a little bit newer. So let's go. So let's see. We have here a standard financial report. It's not even a table, it's just a range with some information on it. And the best way to represent visually such a report is a waterfall chart. And previously, it had to take a lot of customizations in order to get a waterfall chart going. But right now, things are so much simpler. Just larger. The only thing that you need to define is where are the totals, and you can do that with the right click. So this is a total, this is another total. And this is another total. And we have our own waterfall chart that represents the income and the outcome of the report that we shown before. Very easy to follow, very easy to create, and very impressionant on how to represent the data and the inflow and outflow of financials within the revenue report. Another new chart that we've introduced is a chart that actually takes and compares statistical data. Here we have data that comes from 3 schools that have grades on math, English, and physics, and we want to compare those 3 schools. So we want to insert a chart that's called box and whiskers. So here, we have actually each school represented per topic. So we have one subchart for English, one for physics, and one for math. And this chart represents the median, the average, the 75 percentiles, the edge results and the outliers. The outliers is actually when you have from the 2 or more standard deviations from the closest value. So it means that it actually out of the scopes really extreme values. And here you can see that actually if you're thinking about sending your kids to one of those schools, you can see that one school is doing very poorly on all fronts. Another school is kind of okay-ish, but again, there are not a lot of students there that excel. And on the other hand, the third school, the orange one, actually shows a wide distribution, and it leaves, and there are a lot of students that are doing quite well. So it kind of leaves that to the students' capabilities. So that would be probably the preferred school out of those 3. If you select other schools, you would see that actually you're limiting to a certain area of grades that the school doesn't do better than. Another chart that we've been asked by users for a really long time to introduce was a chart that would represent data with hierarchy. Here we have information on vitamin B12 in various brands and products and product lines of cereal. And I want to be able to compare that. So one option would be using a tree map. And you can see the distribution here between the product lines. And this is very helpful if you need just one hierarchy level. It takes the brand and the product and shows the distribution of the vitamin between which product and which brand provides the most vitamin B12 in their cereal. Now, if we want to do and investigate more levels, we have the Sunburst for that. And here you have the distribution across all levels. And you can see that you have the product line, the brand, you have the product line, and you have the individual product when they apply. And when they don't apply, you see the information coming in from the lower hierarchy. Last but not least, we have here sales information from a car dealership. And that car dealership is struggling where to focus their efforts, which brands contribute most to the work, and which brands are actually an overhead and don't really contribute to the sales. So for that, hold on, we have this chart, Pareto chart. And here what we can see is that on one hand, it's a bar chart that represents the amount of cars being sold per brand. And you can see here this chart is actually the accumulated contribution of the sales to the overall sales of the dealership. So if we're looking at what creates the least marginal impact on our sales, that's probably Volkswagen. On the other hand, Ford and Toyota create the most marginal impact on the sales of that dealership. Very easy, very quick insight, doesn't require a lot of analysis, but brings a lot of insight to someone that tries to understand how their business is doing. Okay, switch back. Can you switch back? Let's talk a little bit about the next step. We've created a report. We've brought in data from multiple sources. We've created nice visualization. We created a model for analysis. We created nice visualizations. But eventually, we need to share that with. So we'll talk about sharing and about one of the key tools for sharing in my next session tomorrow. But we'll have a glimpse into one of the options that we have here. So we have the ability to share directly from Excel to SharePoint on-premise, to SharePoint Online or Office 365, and to Power BI. Power BI is actually a tool that allows Excel to be represented within it in multiple ways, whether you can load the data into Power BI and analyze based on that data, or you can use it just to showcase Excel online, which I'll show tomorrow. And you can also take snippets from your workbook and upload them to Power BI. So let's just use the same charts that we have created before. And let's say we want to represent them on a Power BI dashboard. There is a new add-in that's available on the Power BI site that allows you to pin certain information onto Power BI dashboard. So let's take the table, and we want to pin it. We want to have a new dashboard. Let's call it MDIS. And we can have a look into Power BI. And you can see that pinned to the dashboard of Power BI. We can take everything that we want from Excel desktop. We can pin charts as well. Let's pin this one as well. And go back to Power BI, and you will see this chart pinned as well. Yes?
Is that a static pin or
It's a static pin.
data changes?
It's a semi-static pin. There is an option here in Excel in the add-in that's called the pin manager. So you can actually push an update to the pinned image. You cannot pull an update exactly, but it does refresh that once you actively do that from Excel. Can we switch back?
How do you enable the Power BI tab?
Sorry?
How are you enabling the Power BI tab in Excel?
It's an add-in, downloadable from the Power BI website. It's been announced, I think, in the keynote, and it should be available either today or tomorrow, starting to download. So this is exactly the.
And that Power BI add-in is only 2016, Excel 2016.
It should be available in the near future for other versions as well. Right now, I think that the first version is 2016 only. Then it should be available for 2010 and 2013 as well. So, to recap on additional changes that we have done, if previously it was quite hard to get the BI functionality in Excel because it was limited to only to Pro Plus SKU, and you had to have a volume license for that, we have made a few changes. Power Map and Power Query are available across all SKUs, no longer limited to the upper level SKUs. The only difference is that in Power Query, some of the corporate data sources and the corp data catalog is available only for Pro and Pro Plus SKUs. Power Pivot is still available only for Pro and Pro Plus SKUs. It's Professional, Professional Plus, Pro Plus, and standalone Excel versions that include the high-end functionality. So let's recap of what we saw today. Power Query has become a part of Excel. Its integration into Excel allows to use its enterprise catalog, data transformations, new and very extended data sources, and programmability using Excel VBA. We've enhanced the analysis experience, enhancements to the modeling experience, automatic data relationship detection, a deferred update, native forecasting, and various other usability features. In visualization, we've introduced new charts based on the new Ivy charting engine. We introduced type grouping, and we've made Power Map as part of Excel as it could, compared to being an add-in before. And in the next session tomorrow, you can come and see the changes that we have done in Excel Online and Excel On-Prem. And of course, we made it very easy to find everything in Excel. I would like to urge you to give back feedback, not just for the session, but generally in Excel. This is where we're looking for customer feedback. Excel user voice is where you want to, if you have suggestions, requests, any kind of information that you would like us as a product team to assess, evaluate, and eventually put into the product. Excel user voice is the place. We also have courses running in EDX system of various levels of data analysis and BI functionality. Just check out the courses there. There's a tool especially about Power Query, especially about Power Pivot, and in general, a full analysis tool courses there. And some of the sessions that we have, presume that you're interested. Any questions? Yes, please.
Because earlier you said that with Power Query, data relationship, you mentioned data relationship reports. What happens if you import data from a database that has tables that have multiple joins in between them? How does Power Query reconcile that?
It depends on the structure of the database. If it's a database that has formal relationships, as sometimes we see in SQL or in Access, it will import them. From Access, it will be available in one of the upcoming updates. It's not available in the GA itself. Other joins that are specifically just SQL queries on the product won't be represented. It pulls basically raw data or specified relationships. Yes?
So when you're working with the relationships, right, actually that pop-up that came up.
Yep.
Says, hey, there may be relationships. You click on it and it says 0 relationships to be added or something. How can you further investigate that then?
Then you have to open the Manage window within Power Pivot. That Manage window is available also from the Data tab. And then you could see the relationship that you have already created. Sometimes it happens when you have created automatically a relationship for a different analysis, and then you change the analysis, it doesn't remove the previous relationships. So that could collide and create such a scenario. Usually from blank point, that scenario should not happen. Yes?
Are they doing anything to automate the data refresh with Power Query and Power Pivot?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Data refresh with Power Query and Power Pivot.
So Power Query data refresh is automated. It means you can set up a schedule for if you use Power BI, you upload the workbook to Power BI, and you can set up the refresh for the workbook through Power BI. No, not yet, no. Because eventually it goes to refresh through the BI function, to Azure BI functionality. Any other questions? Yes, please.
So what you basically showed is, kind of week-only actionable insight. Is there any development being done? You mentioned DBA earlier.
Yeah.
You can add write back, either in the database or in the file.
Mm-hmm.
You can really follow through the action.
You're talking about write back to data sources through Power Query?
Could be, or it could at least having access to the data that the user may want to select, and then decide further previously.
So you can always, in Power Query, you can always come back to the data. You can see the raw data in the preview window, in the query editor. You can always come back, change the transformations that you have created, bring additional set of data as long as it's available on the source. As for write back is not available yet. It's something that we're considering. There are pros and cons for write backing because quite a few corporations are actually against it. Our biggest customers don't really like it because they have very strict policies on who can write back to databases. So there's a very thin line that we need to walk here. We're indeed considering this, but we need to take the right precautions when introducing such functionality. And of course, role-based security in order to support that for SQL Server.
Yeah, I was mentioning, not really thinking about writing back to the source,
Mm-hmm.
writing back somewhere else. Just using it for
So you can do that. If you write into the grid, you can extend the table on the grid. And as long as you don't change the order on the grid, the updates will continue. So it will be aligned with the updates.
I have a similar question.
Yep.
And are you saying like if you take data from source A, do the transformations, and then write out the CSV file, is that what you're talking about?
So you can always do that. You can create a table on the grid in Excel based on all the transformations that you have done in Power Query, and then save that Excel workbook as a CSV or export it as a CSV.
Or you probably use VBA to do some of that, like do the Power Query and then VBA.
You can do that with VBA. You can actually create the right query and then with a macro record it and add the export action with VBA. So it can be fully automated. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you very much.